Ledger is a writing podcast and both a shenanigan and a hijinks. My name's Austin Wilson. Welcome to today's show. I am chatting with screenwriter Laura Kroeger. She is one of two winners of the 2024 Final Draft Big Break Contest. It's a screenwriting contest held by one of the screenwriting industry standards when it comes to script writing and formatting. They get a lot of mentions on today's show, and just as a disclaimer, I want to say that they're not sponsoring the episode. This is just a chat with Laura about what she has accomplished so far. So she won the Big Break contest with her script Bigger in Texas, and she graciously repeats the elevator pitch for that script in the show, so you'll get to hear what it's about. I'm sure she's done that a bajillion times at this point, so I really do appreciate her doing it again. I freaking loved getting to chat with Laura. We talked about so much stuff that really resonated with me. She's also a bookseller, like I'm a bookseller, so we had a lot of stuff in common. She talks about how the Women in Film and Video, which is a organization in Washington, D.C., she sometimes refers to them as WIF. She talks about how they helped with her writing, how her own reading and writing groups outside of WIF are organized, and how much those have helped her as well. But also how her brand new manager, his name's Max Gonzalez at Fourth Wall Management, how much he's already played such an integral role in her career. It seriously is such a super informative chat for anyone out there who's wondering what it's like right at the beginning of a career in film and TV, like the inflection point of getting your scripts in front of people and having meetings and hearing about what's going to happen or what could happen and just all of the stuff that you think about or dream about. This is the step right as it's starting. She talks about the incredible amount of hard work that she's put in, including, and I'm not kidding here, diagramming movies in a way. I honestly don't want to spoil it, so just keep your ears out for it. But I really do think it gives a great glimpse in what you need to do when you're starting out writing scripts, or even if you're not starting out, you're further on in your career doing it, and what you need to continue writing scripts. And namely, this is a little bit of alliteration for you: passion, patience, and people. Those three things I really do think tie together a lot of what Laura talks about. It's seriously, I had so much fun chatting with Laura. I'm glad that she stopped by, and I really hope you listening to this get a lot out of it. As for my work, go to austinrwilson.com as always. And now, brand new, you can go to patreon.com/Ledger Podcast if you'd like to support the show. I have a post up there talking about ads and how they're not exactly my first choice for helping me keep the show running on a consistent schedule, but you are, the listener, you're my first choice. If you'd like to support the show in other ways than going to Patreon, please like, comment, rate, subscribe, and share. It really, really does help. But as for now, here's my chat with screenwriter Laura Kroeger. I heard you on the Final Draft podcast and talking about your big win, and I was so interested in what you've done leading up to now and kind of just how you write for where you are in your career. For listeners, as they heard in the intro, you're the winner of the 2024 Big Break Grand Prize, one of the two winners.
Mm-hmm.
So I do want to talk a little bit about that, but the big thing that I wanted to talk to you about is I kept hearing you talk about community and all of these other people that have helped you with your writing, and community is a big thing here. So I'm curious about when you started writing, because in that podcast you talked about working in politics previously.
Yep.
I'm curious about when you started writing and you felt you were serious enough about it that you sought other people.
That's a tough question. I remember always writing a lot as a kid, and for every adult that kind of encouraged that, there was also an adult that didn't think it was very practical of a career. And so as I grew up, I loved to write. I still wrote into my teen years and in college, but I kind of tried to find a more practical career path. So I think that there was a little voice inside me for a long time saying that this wasn't something that I should pursue with any large amount of effort. And so I did. I went into politics. It was really kind of more government related work. And I live in Washington, D.C. I worked in Congress. I worked in kind of government adjacent things for a really long time. And then in the pandemic, I just sort of had a moment of, what would I regret not doing now if I was on my deathbed? Like, what would I have wished that former Laura had done? And it was pursuing writing. Film has always been a big love of mine. I always felt nervous about being a creator in that space. I always thought I was going to be a critic or just a movie buff, somebody on the outside. But this was something that I could do on my own. I didn't need equipment. I didn't need actors. Well, not yet. I could kind of start this process and work on my craft alone. But I'm not a very solitary person. I do enjoy the work of writing alone, but then I want to tell somebody about it, or I want to relate to somebody about it, or I want somebody to tell me what's wrong with my thing or how it could be improved. I've always been somebody who's benefited from like a group or social dynamic. Like, I won't work out unless there's like a bunch of other people working out with me, or if I know that I'm going to have to see people and tell them about my workout or something like that. So that was a fairly natural conclusion to come to. So how I went about it, I left my government, my working government, my political job without a real plan, but it was still kind of the later days of the pandemic before everything had gone exactly back to normal. So a ton of stuff was online. There were webinars, there were kind of Zoom happy hours. There was a lot that I could access from where I was to kind of start my journey in teaching myself how to write and meeting people. And then as things started to come a little bit back to normal, I met folks in person. I met a ton of people at the Austin Film Festival. I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit later. Women in Film and Video is an organization in Washington, D.C. that is kind of the main social and networking organization for filmmakers in the area. And all of these communities were able to give me a lot of support, and I could give support to them in turn. So it's always been a both and situation for me, just as a person and as a writer specifically.
So I'm curious then, so had you written scripts prior to 2020 or tried that format at all?
No, probably a few pages in a class in college. I do have a film degree along with an international relations degree, but nothing lengthy that I had attempted. I began writing my first script before I quit, technically. I only got a few pages in and they were kind of nonsense pages, but it was the same idea that eventually became bigger in Texas, which was the script that won, well, first a fellowship with WIP and then Final Draft Big Break a couple of years later. So it all was connected. But yeah, once I quit is when I started to kind of teach myself in earnest and try to finish that script.
And I saw you online, specifically in that Final Draft podcast, talking about some of the books that you had used. But before we get to some of those things, I'm curious about do you know how many drafts
I have no
you
idea.
accomplished?
No
No idea?
I have no idea because I did not know that you were supposed to save different drafts when that's how early I was. I would just save
Yeah.
over it. Like, I would make a change and it would be the same document. And somebody said, like, how many drafts? I was like, what does that mean? Like, it's that one.
It's the one.
Yeah, and now I've swung in the totally other direction. I save a new file like every time I open up a screenwriting program, like by the date. So if I cut one line, I could probably, breadcrumb my way back.
I just started doing that the other day because I lost a file, and
Yep.
there was like 4 or 5 pages I lost because I was saving over the file.
Yep.
Still trying to keep track of drafts, but I lost some files. And weirdly, even though, this isn't sponsored by Final Draft has a folder that does actual backups that I could have went in and found. But I just got so terrified that I was like, nope, screw this. Every day, it's going to be dated.
Yeah.
I have a Dropbox. I'm just going to do it.
Yeah, it's good practice. It might be overkill, but, at least you never lose anything.
Right. So that's quick. 2020.
Yeah. So probably 2021, if we're honest. Yeah, 2021 is when all of this sort of kicked off.
Had you been reading scripts before that? Did you have regularly read scripts?
No, I made all the mistakes in the book. I probably read one script before I started to read, and it was a part of a script, and it was Little Women by Greta Gerwig. And in this script, she breaks a bunch of rules that you're not supposed to break. And I took that one script and I was like, this is my gospel. And it was terrible. I got ripped apart for it in the fellowship because I had used like color coding to show flashbacks. And they're like, you can't do this. And I was like, well, Greta Gerwig did it, thinking I was so smart. I was not smart. No, one of my friends, who's a really wonderful writer herself, began a script reading group that I joined at some point along the way. And that we would read one script a month, which is not a high clip, but that got me in the habit of reading scripts a lot more and realizing that my love of watching movies was not enough to make me a good writer. I needed to read them as well. So everything was a learning process, but I made a lot of mistakes at the beginning, as we all do.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't really know that there's any way around it. It just kind of depends on when you start making the mistakes in your own process, because everybody starts,
Right.
different times. I have scripts that I wrote when I was young, and they're garbage. It's atrocity how bad they are.
If you want, I'll just tell you more of my shame. I'll never forget there was one mentor in the fellowship program that I was in. It just got him, must have been by the skin of my teeth because I didn't feel like they liked it very much once I got in there, but they helped me immensely. And one mentor told me that my writing was quote unquote literarily exhausting. And he copied and pasted like maybe half a page of a script into a document that he could edit live, shared his screen with me and the whole group, and then edited my work to make it pithier, basically, to take words out, to rearrange sentences, show me line by line what I didn't need. First of all, that changed everything. Like, that was definitely a light bulb moment. I'm grateful to him. But yeah, you can start off being very bad and get better.
I mean, I don't know, literarily exhausting. That's like a business card title. You own that one. You started out bigger in Texas. I definitely want to jump into what you ended up winning the Big Break Prize with. I'm just so curious about those relationships and the way that they affected your writing, and also the idea that you aren't really a solitary person, because that's one of the big things you hear always about writing is like, you got to be comfortable being alone. So I'm curious about, are you in those groups? Are you guys doing writing groups where you're like silently writing together, or is it literally just like we write and then we go talk about it?
No, we are a read and give notes type of writing group. So we've been going for about 2.5 years now. There are 6 of us. 2 have left and 2 came on board. So pretty low turnover, and we are fairly strict in our meeting habits. And I think that we've all really benefited for it. We meet pretty much every Tuesday. We miss like usually once a month for a holiday or something. 2 people submit pages every week, and that can be like as little or as much as you want. It can be a 120-page full script, or it can be a page of logline ideas and say, which one do you think I should pursue next? And the rules are that everybody has to give written notes, like pretty thorough written notes, not just like, I liked it. And they have to attend the Tuesday meeting and give verbal notes for everybody has 30 minutes to receive notes from people. And if you miss, you still have homework. You still have to submit the written notes, and you have to schedule a makeup phone call with each of the people who were going that week. So it really trains people. There's no getting out of it. You can't just like show up when you're getting notes and then never give notes to other people. Everybody is in this together. We also have a group chat. We keep in touch during the week if somebody has something exciting or an article to share or something. And it has been one of the most influential things on my writing, for sure. I think a lot of writers, especially those just emerging, are very nervous to share their work, especially at an early phase, or they say, I want to make it perfect. I want to make it perfect. I've learned that you cannot make it perfect on your own. And the earlier you share it, the better it's going to be in the end. When I had written only one script, I thought those were like all the best ideas I would ever have, because those are the only ones that I had. I had stopped kind of taking an input outside of my own self, if that makes sense. I'm not explaining this super well, but like I needed input in order to have like better output. And the earlier I got that input, the better my output was. And the less tragic it was when I had to cut a scene I liked or a line I liked or something like that. And the lovely thing about my writing group is I really trust these people, and I know I know they don't think I'm a bad writer. So if I submit something bad and they say, Laura, this is bad, it's not, I do not take it so personally that I then like can't get out of bed for the week, which is what I feared when I was first starting out. So building that level of trust with other people, with your work, is invaluable. I hope we go forever. I hope we never stop. But yeah, so it's hard to start. It's hard to get, a specific number of people who are the equal level of committed to doing it on a regular basis. But if you can make it happen, it'll pay dividends.
Finding other people who take it as seriously as you do. And I think also giving yourself that freedom to be like, because everyone always talks about like, oh, the statistics, the chance of you getting a movie made are infinitesimal. And it's like, I feel like that can defeat some people, and finding other people who are like, I don't care what the statistics say. Like, I'm writing this thing because I have to. And finding those people who are committed and aren't like, well, something came up, I can't do it. I have a plan that changed. I need to do this other thing. Because like I've said in previous episodes of the show, like, it's so easy to not write.
Yeah, it's kept me producing too. I know I have to go every month. I have to have them read something of mine every month. And we just had a meeting last night, and I went and I had only written 5 pages. It was kind of a low productivity month, but like they still have to read it and they still have to give me feedback. So life changes all over. Some months are really productive, some are not, but the writing group keeps you moving forward.
Knowing that right around 2021, while we were chatting via email, setting stuff up, you said you had submitted some scripts to Austin Film Festival, which means you started submitting really quickly after you started writing your screenplays. I'm so interested to hear about that process, and if you felt like, well, I'm writing these, I'm putting the time, like what made you be like, I have to submit to contests, to festivals, to fellowships? Like, did that just feel like the natural progression, or was it, I need to do this so that I can either try to get representation or try to get a film produced? Like, what was your thinking around the process?
I'm trying to remember the sequence of events. I'm fairly certain I I certainly went to Austin Film Festival for the first time before I submitted to the Austin Film Festival screenplay contest. And I think I might have gone before I went and submitted to any contest.
Yeah.
So I spent most of 2022 working on Bigger in Texas in the WIF Narrative Script Development Fellowship, which was super influential, super intense. And I had started a second script, but I was sort of, really devoting myself to the rewrites on Bigger in Texas. And I do remember that there was someone in my cohort in the fellowship who did recommend going to Austin to meet other writers. At that stage, I had met a few people online. I had just started in my writing group, I think probably that month, and I had not met a lot of other folks in person, except maybe in DC here and there at a coffee. So I went to Austin, not having submitted to the contest, was immediately in love with it, knew I would go back, really enjoyed meeting all these other people, like talking about, talking craft with other people who get it. That was a revelation that there were other people out there who were doing what I was doing. But I also realized that I could get more out of it if I submitted to the contest and placed. And I think probably out of that experience, I looked into what other contests were worth it, which had good reputations. There were a couple local ones that I thought I might be able to network at if I got very far in. There are some of the biggies that everybody knows about once you start poking around in this world. AFF, Final Draft Big Break, Nickel, maybe a few others. So that was my trajectory to contests. I tried to be very careful, and I did learn, and perhaps this will be useful to your listeners, that my scripts did better in contests that I applied to much earlier than they did on the deadline. And I think the readers are not as tired. That is my only excuse, and maybe a little bit more forgiving. Yeah. But yes, that was my general plan, is I would submit every script that I wrote once to everything. Unless I did like major rewrites, I wouldn't submit it again. And I had missed the Final Draft Big Break deadline when I was doing most of my Bigger in Texas submissions. And so the next year I said, all right, this will be the last one that I throw Bigger in Texas into. And then I'll put it in a drawer and maybe one day it'll have a second life. And it ended up winning the whole thing, which no one was more surprised than me.
Well, oh gosh, I have so many questions around that. Where do we start? Bigger in Texas. Let's talk about
Mm-hmm.
it. I heard you break it down a little bit on their podcast, but give me the elevator pitch, and then let's talk about how you ended up where you did with it.
Yeah. So Bigger in Texas is a story about a woman who, by all appearances, has it all: the jobs, the kids, the husband, the wealth. She lives in Texas and she starts to lose all of those things seemingly overnight. She gets very mad at the world that supposedly created this situation and decides to take out her rage and also make a little bit of money by blackmailing powerful men using sex toys. And this is based on the insanity statute that's still on the books in Texas and some other places that make it illegal to own sex toys over a certain number. And this came out of one, my frustration with some of my work in government, of people who are fine with the status quo and don't work harder to make it better. And also a bit of a warning about laws that are still on the books that seem unenforced or not really like important, and don't worry about that, nobody's going to do anything. And I think, as we've seen in the last couple of years, all it takes is a change of power or a person in office to suddenly use all the tools at their disposal, even the ones that we believe to be unjust. But it's also a little funny. So it's not quite the social scolding that I'm making it sound like. It's a goofy crime caper and with a little bit of heart and a social awareness.
Well, it's got a fun premise for sure. And so, did you have story structure? Like, was structure one of the things that, as you were working on the script, you were realizing, oh, I need to focus more on structure. I didn't understand it as much as I thought I did, or
Yes.
because from my perspective, it seems like you succeeded so quickly, which I know it doesn't feel like that to you, but I'm just so curious how if structure was one of the things you were like, well, someone help me.
Yes, I still struggle with structure. I feel like I'm much more of a detail oriented person, especially when I read and give notes, than I am with overall emotional beats and pacing. I started writing the first draft of Bigger in Texas totally non sequentially, which is my norm, and really just based on scenes that I felt I saw vividly in my head. I thought the kind of like the lightning strike moment was enough. Like inspiration was what was going to guide me and make me good. And that does not a structure make. Like even when you knit them all together, it feels like a series of scenes, not a well-crafted story, right? And as I learned more about structure, I was waiting for that lightning bolt moment where it feels natural. Like I just know the structure so well backwards and forwards that when I write, it comes out. That has still never happened for me. What I ended up doing in the rewrite of Bigger in Texas is I watched movies, sometimes like not famous movies. I've learned that the really well-known movies don't always have a typical structure. Like that's why they're the auteurs, you know. So if I wanted to learn the basics, I took kind of mediocre movies and I watched them with, I don't know why I did this, but this worked for me, like a Google spreadsheet where all of the rows corresponded to the minute of the film. And every minute in the film, I wrote down what happened, if I could describe it in some sort of term. And I did this for several. So each column was a film. And then I could see the similarities between the films. So I was like, okay, in these two or three, you know, normal person does crime capers that I was trying to match tonally, this happens at minute 15 or 18. This is when the two get together. This is when they decide to do the crime, yada, yada, yada. And that I think helped me figure out, it's like a very grueling process. It's not fun to watch a movie that way. There's a lot of pausing and writing in a spreadsheet, but it worked for me.
That is a badass note. That's the kind of stuff that I want to hear about. That is like, on the one hand, that's crazy. On the other hand, that is what it takes.
I knew I knew nothing, and I read a lot of books. I read a lot of the screenplay books. Some of them went in one ear and out the other. I was like, nothing in this is memorable to me. Some of them seemed like light bulb moments at the time, and then later I was like, this isn't practical, or this isn't, this did not influence me the way I was hoping. So I think just the grind of it was necessary for me to get a sense of what structure looked like.
I feel like that makes me understand you more than anything else that I could potentially ask you. That's such a great, just an image of you doing that. Seriously, that's awesome. And I know what you mean about the books. I've read some. That Sid Field book did nothing for me, and it felt more like I was like, it seems like you're scolding me. Why does it seem like I've failed already? But there's been a few. I do like John Truby's stuff quite a bit, and Christopher Vogler's The Writer's Journey has been one of the ones that I return to a lot. But you mentioned the Screenwriter's Bible, and I really wanted to talk about the way that sort of matched up with your process and how it has influenced you. And literally just because I love that book, so I'm curious about your experience with it.
I've never read it all the way through, like cover to cover. I have only looked things up and then put a sticky note in there with a little tab on the side so I can look up what a montage looks like, or I can look what a phone conversation looks like, or I can look up the different options for text messages. That's the kind of thing that I think, baby writer Laura reading her single Greta Gerwig script was really lacking. I thought I would read one script and learn by osmosis, but I needed a reference book. And that ended up being the key one for me. I was very lucky, and I have like a dog-eared copy that I got used, but one of the one of the elements of the very generous prize package for Final Draft Big Break was like a signed copy of the most recent edition from Dave Trottier. So that was very nice to be able to email with him a little bit.
So yeah, you talk about it, and I heard you a little bit about it already, but I'm just so curious now if you feel like, how do you feel as a writer now? How do you feel?
Well, that's kind of two different questions, right? There's how do you feel from a craft perspective and from an industry perspective. I think we've talked a lot about craft and kind of finding your footing as a writer early on, but the last 6 months, most of what's changed for me is industry side. So through the final draft process, I got a manager, and that's changed so much for me. His influence has been immeasurable, and everything I get to do and every person I get to talk to is the coolest and best and highest possible thing I could have imagined. Like I got news last night I won't get into that I was like, if this is the last thing that ever happens in this process, I'll be happy. Like I've already satisfied Laura on her deathbed. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I've not made it, but I've done what I came here to do, and I'm happy to keep going. So industry stuff has been night and day. Craft, I feel like I still have so much to learn. I don't feel like I have gotten to that place where it feels like second nature to write, at least structurally. I miss getting into like a flow state where it feels like it's just like flowing out of me. I find that very rare these days. It's a lot more slow going, but my writing is better for it. So they're kind of two different states of mind. But I also know that the industry stuff would not be possible without all of the years of craft, focusing on craft that I had before that. So they all sort of feed into each other. It's an ebb and a flow.
Yeah. Do you think something exists that could make you feel like I made it? Or is that a...
Yeah, it's a stupid one though. I want to be like invited to the Criterion Closet, but not the van. I'll do the van. I will do the van, but for my merits. And I want to make a little video where I say like, "Hi, I'm Ben Affleck, and this is Armageddon," and all that stuff. And like you and I were talking about this before, like both of us are booksellers too. Like, and there's something really magical about saying this piece of art touched me and here I recommend it to you and maybe it'll touch you too. And that's what I want to do all the time, but namely, yes, by going into the Criterion Closet.
Oh, I mean, that one's not stupid.
It's not like winning an Oscar. I mean, I could say stuff like that, but really that's the specific thing that I think about.
I've thought about awards and what they actually mean and like how important they are and like I've always just kind of battled with the idea of because if somebody if I wrote something and it got nominated for an Oscar, I would be over the freaking moon. Austin in current state right now talking to you is like, yeah, but that wouldn't really mean in earnest that I was any better or like would it?
You've thought about your
Of
acceptance
course
speech
I
though.
have.
Like don't lie.
Of
Like
course
you
I have.
like when you're falling asleep or something, like it's like there. You're thinking about what you would
Oh,
say.
even
You're putting the words
even
together.
more directly, I've like straight up mirror. It's been like, this is for you, and
You're holding the hairbrush. Yeah.
well, no, not me. I don't have the hairbrush, but
This is for all the people that didn't
that's
believe
right.
in
This
me.
is for you.
Yeah.
You said I couldn't do it. No, I talk about it a lot with a lot of writers because it's a thing that I struggle with, which is the ways in which I define myself as a writer and the ways in which success defines me or the absence of success defines me. And also I try to constantly separate myself from my writing or the idea that I am a writer, but it's not easy. It's a thing that I'm always battling, I think.
Do you think that our love of selling books is connected to writing in the sense that we like to recommend things to people and writing is just an extension of that feeling? Like I have this thing in my head and it brought me joy. Like let me share this with you and have it bring you joy.
I've never thought about it like that.
I haven't either until this moment, but I think you're making me sound a lot smarter than I am, so I'm on a roll.
Well, no, I think that's smart. Both because I think it makes us sound smart, and also because I think it just is. I don't know. I had never thought about it that way. That those two would be connected. I love recommending things that have touched me or that have changed my life in some way. I legitimately. It gives me chills just to the idea that I could be like, this book knocked me on my ass. And I think it could do the same thing for you. Like, I just love it. And you know what? I think there is a part of me that is scared that I am operating under this like hubristic belief that I'm capable of creating that thing for someone with my own story. That I'm scared to be like, you know what's going to do the thing? You know what's going to help you or change you or make a mark on your life? This thing I wrote. I think there's a part of me that's afraid of that.
It feels like there's two different ways of people of getting joy out of people liking what you write, or I won't say you, us or me.
Sure.
And kind of the first level, or I think the level I entered the writing space with was I want them to think I'm a good writer. Like I want the praise. I want to be seen as a good writer. It is a little bit more about my perception. And the longer I do this, the more if they say that they like it, I'm hoping it brought them joy. I'm hoping I taught them something. Sometimes I go down a Wikipedia rabbit hole in a certain like place and time, and I want to tell everybody about this thing. Sometimes I just want to explain a very specific human experience that maybe not everybody has access to. But I think my focus has transitioned from me to me and my perception to them and their experience. And that more mimics the book selling, the movie recommending, the joy that I get from that than the first element that I was describing. Yeah, I just wonder if they're connected, if we're wired that way.
It kind of seems impossible that they're not. Now that you've brought it up, I'm like, oh yeah, no, I think that does seem very...
It's certainly more vulnerable though. I mean, to what you were saying, if I recommend a book to somebody and they're like, I didn't like this book, I was like, well, I tried. But it is different if it came from your own experience or your own words or your own mind.
I like what you said, though, that you want them to think you're a good writer. And,
We all do a little, but like, it does change over
oh,
time.
I think it's more than a little. I think it's like, if I'm being honest, I want someone to be like, man, that guy's a good writer. And it's selfish and kind of shallow, and I think not necessary, because like, if I'm being, magnanimous, or trying to sound less like a jerk, I would be like, I would want to be called a good storyteller. But really, because you know what else I think it is, and I'm pretty sure because you're a bookseller too, I just like, I know how much I love stories and how much stories mean to me, and I want to be that for someone else, where somebody's like, that story hit me. And I hate saying it out loud, even, because it makes me feel so like I'm wounded, and everyone can just see, like, oh, look at him, he needs help, he's so weak. Which maybe that's, the toxic masculinity I grew up in and surrounded by.
Yeah, I think it is quite vulnerable to admit, because it feels like it takes away from the artistry a bit. Like, you want to be able to say that you're an artist, but if you're just a person who wants praise and acceptance, then it's just you and me and the rest of the world, right? Like,
Yeah,
it's a little bit more pedestrian.
yeah,
I
it's
think it's
tough.
true.
Yeah,
It's
well,
very
yeah, I mean,
authentic. Yeah.
so what's next? How many how many full-length scripts have you finished, before we start wrapping up?
After Bigger in Texas, I wrote a political rom-com that no one will ever make, called Political Climate. It's an adaptation of a Shakespeare play. I love Much Ado About Nothing, and I loved it and started and finished this before Anyone But You came out. I set it. I used to work in Congress. It was my first job out of college, and I was really struck by how everybody could be extremely smart. You're surrounded by the smartest people, and they were so emotionally unintelligent. Like, they were all very young. Nobody gets paid very much, so you don't do it when you're older and you have kids to support and stuff. And everybody works so much and so many long hours that they all just sort of date within the building, and not always in like the healthiest way. So I wrote Much Ado About Nothing set in two congressional offices of the same party. This is not like a commentary on, like, we just have to cross the aisle. It's not that. It's just a workplace setting. And had a great time with it. They're trying to pass a climate change bill. No one will ever pay for the sets of the inside of the Capitol building. And I've made my peace with that. But it got a little bit of attention. It was ranked pretty highly in the Hollywood Climate Summit Pitch Fest competition. So that was kind of fun. And I learned a lot of what to do and what not to do in terms of adaptations. I
Yeah.
took a very literal approach to the play, as in like one-to-one scenes. And I think that it made it very theatrical, but not very cinematic. So that is something that I do love. I love banter. I love a shenanigan. I love a hijinks, but I think it just is what it is. And then I spent a little time trying to teach myself TV pilot formats, just in case. I do live in DC, but maybe not forever. So I wrote a drama pilot called Divorce Ranch, about a 1934 dude ranch that's converted into a B&B for divorce seekers. Nevada was one of the only places that you could get a one-sided divorce for a really long time in our country. And a community of divorce tourism popped up around it. So I kind of call that like White Lotus in 1934 with divorced women. And then I wrote a 30-minute pilot. It's a buddy comedy about time travel, where both of the buddies are the same person, a 30-something-year-old woman who's kind of a free spirit, beta tests time travel for a tech company and ends up stuck back with her high school self, who doesn't care for her very much. And that was just kind of a fun experience. My sister had just become a mom, and I was talking to my mom about like watching us grow up, and I'm thinking about my cousins who are teens now and in college, and the advice that I would give to them that seems really smart to me but might not be useful at all to them. And that was a fun one. And now I'm working on another feature. Well, I'm working on a couple things. We'll kind of see which one takes off first.
Yeah. How much of your day is spent writing?
That's a complicated question. What I should say is like 1 hour every day in the morning. I don't. It's a little bit more in fits and starts.
Yeah.
And also, writing is for me. Writing is also research. I
Mhm.
know this sounds really silly, but if I am writing, like for example, one of the works in progress that I have is an action film. I haven't written an action film before. I'm going to watch a lot of action films. I read a lot of romance. I'm going to read some romantic suspense. I'm going to get kind of in that world and see if it sparks ideas. Because without any input, there is no output, for me. I am not a person who has a very strong imagination where I'm like world building and thinking of all these creative things. It is really I see something and then I put it together in a different combination. So, yeah, I spend a lot of time reading and watching things. I am also taking a lot of meetings, which is really lovely. And so sometimes the work that I do is not necessarily script pages, but it's maybe a 2-pager to kind of explain what my idea would be if I was hired to write this script. And yeah, I'm working to find a new normal. We were kind of talking before about how my particular book selling job had a very dramatic first couple months of existing. And so I'm still working out what a regular schedule looks like for me now that everything changed about 6 months ago.
So, gosh, before we wrap up then, 3
Yeah,
questions.
I've got time.
Because number one, I'm so intrigued by you saying that you don't have a super vivid imagination and how that plays into your writing. I mean, I'm just like, but she does. Because I feel like that's just such a part of writing. Like, I'm so curious how that manifests for you, like what that means for you. Is it just visually or?
Yeah, I'm not like down on myself about it. I met somebody once, another writer who I told him how much time I spend in research, and he said, that sounds like my idea of hell. Like I was at the Library of Congress, like reading original sources for Divorce Ranch for months before I wrote anything down because I needed to know, is there a post office in this? Like, would it be logical for someone to go and talk to a lawyer? And how would that happen? Is there one lawyer? Are there 20 lawyers? I feel like I needed a lot of context to draw from. And he is a fantasy writer. And he said, I want to invent like 10 planets. And then you get to hop between planets. And then this type of magic happens. And oh, there's a problem that I can't fix. More magic. Like,
yeah,
that I don't want to do that. I'm not down on myself about it though, because have you ever seen Scorsese talk about his process? Like if they'll show him a clip from one of his movies, he'll go, I stole that shot from this movie. I stole that shot from this movie. I stole that shot from this movie. Like he too is just sort of a rearranging of all of the things that he has observed in his life and then putting them out into the world in a different combination in a way that's really unique and very much him. And that I don't think that takes away from his
I also don't
artistry
think
at all.
There's anyone who doesn't do that. Like there's no way.
Yeah, Laura, you think you're so unique.
That's not what I meant.
You have no imagination.
That's not what I meant.
It's everybody.
I meant that we're just always surrounded by stuff and always taking things in, and we can't help it. I think your process definitely is not my process. It doesn't sound like hell to me, honestly.
Yeah, tell me what yours is.
Well, I mean, gosh. So what I end up doing is I create a document that I call stream of consciousness. And that is where everything gets dumped. Research goes into it. I end up dating all of my entries. I use a program called Obsidian so that I can search for a word or a date. I do beat sheets. I almost always have to write linear, and writing just random scenes in script form is super hard for me. Like I end up having to just dump them into that stream where it's like they say this, they say this, they say this, and then when I get to that scene, I'll like go to there and be like, well, that's garbage, can't say that, and it almost acts as another draft kind of. But I write horror and sci-fi and rom-coms, weirdly not one of the ones you would associate with those three, but I tend to write pretty linearly.
That makes sense to me though. I think genre writers are comfortable with restrictions of the genre. So, well, first of all, I think that horror and romance are buddies.
Yep.
And I think that somebody, do Do you know who Chuck Tingle is?
Yeah.
Okay. So he said something that I think about all the time now. It was some sort of like PowerPoint presentation he was doing. He's a writer for your listeners, and he writes really wackadoo stuff. And he said that the three most like maligned genres are horror, romance, and comedy. And he said that the thing in common between all these three that are considered like not intellectual is that they provoke a response in the body. So either like love or horniness, fear or laughter. And that is considered like base, like not intellectual. But I think it's like the most human thing to laugh or cry or be afraid or to love. So I love that kind of stuff. Horror is not my particular genre, but I understand what draws people to it in a way where I don't have to live it to get it, if that makes sense.
I agree, and that's I think another thing. It making someone laugh for me, that's almost the top. Like, and comedy's not really the thing that I'm like. I'm a comedy writer, but if I get to make someone laugh, my day is made. Like I feel great about it, which is weird that you would. I don't gravitate towards writing comedies, but
Me either. I'm not a jokes per page person, I think. But do like I do like an absurd situation.
well, you love shenanigans. This is what I've heard.
I love a shenanigan. I do.
It's hard not to. They're great.
I'll forgive a lot. I think I'm just perpetually trying to figure out how to make a screwball comedy work in 2025. It won't, but I want it to. You know what I mean? I'll forgive a lot if it's like silly enough.
I bet if you got the right elements, the right social situation, I bet you could make it work. I bet Gen Z doesn't know that they would love a screwball comedy.
That might be true. A skibbity toilet in there or something.
See, they're like right on the edge of being where they need to be. So wrapping up, your job in politics and now I'm so curious about selling yourself versus selling your work and how that dichotomy feels to you now versus maybe before, or if it's even a thing that you had ever had to contemplate before.
I think I knew early on that not a lot of people had the background that I do. In DC, you trip off a curb when you hit 10 people who worked on the Hill. Like, it's not super rare. But I think in Hollywood, perhaps there are fewer writers who have that specific experience. So I knew that would be a focus. But as I grow as a writer, I do have that literal experience. I wrote a rom-com that's literally set in Congress, but I also just have a perspective on the world that's informed by that experience that I think is valuable. But I also have a lot of other interests. Like, I made it a Shakespeare adaptation, and not like a King Lear thing like that you would expect with politics. It's just a dating comedy. I love musical theater. I love screwball comedies, and not everything is like specifically aligned with super serious political dramas or something. So I struggle still to define myself with a brand. For a long time, I would say something about strong female protagonists and social commentary. And in this most recent work in progress, there's a man at the center of it. And I'm like, oh, God, I have to redefine this whole thing now?
Yeah.
Like, ugh. So I don't know, but I do try to make a good impression and be earnest about what I care about and what gets me really excited, because I think that there is a shortage of earnestness. When I was younger, I used to think that like cynicism was accuracy. Like you were kind of a chump if you weren't a little cynical about stuff, and I'm still pretty cynical about a lot of stuff, but I think that there's a lot of joy to be had in genuinely loving things. And so I try to, when I can't define myself in a sentence, I just try to be as earnest as I can about what I do love.
That's so funny. I just had a conversation last night with my wife about the idea of being cool, because I saw a video about Gen Z specifically being like, gosh, millennials are just so lucky that they grew up and they could be cringe. And I started.
No, they called us posers. We had all sorts of stuff. No way.
See,
we just didn't write it down.
I thought the same thing too. Like, you're a poser, you're a fake geek girl, you're this, you're that, and I feel like the idea of coolness is so bullshit. It's just so stupid. Like, I'm not cool. I don't even, one of my best friends had a question. He questioned me one time. He was like, Austin, what do you think life would be like if we were hot? And I was like, dude, we would be completely different people. There's no way for us to know. Like, our lives.
I don't know. Can't relate, Austin.
Yeah, I set myself up for that. I've talked about me specifically. If I was a hot guy, which I am not, if I was, he was like, what would it be like? So there's always that part of me that's like, what if I could be a writer who was just like, yeah, this is my script. I am going to color code emotional beats. Like, this is me.
No, none of us were hot in high school. That's why we're writers. We'd be doing something else. Not, like probably zero writers were hot, or at least didn't think of themselves as hot.
Yeah, you're probably almost definitely right. And last thing, I've asked this before. I asked a playwright about writing a play that doesn't get produced, and I was so interested in her answer. Her name's Bella Point, and that show she was like, why would I write a play to not produce it? Which I'm not denigrating her answer or anything. I was just so curious about the mindset around that versus writing spec scripts, where you're like, the likelihood this gets produced is pretty close to zero.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about the experience of writing spec scripts and when you think a spec script has succeeded.
I think when I think a spec script has succeeded that I've written, mm-hmm. I think I've been strategic all the way through. It doesn't mean that every script I've written is serving me at all times, but it's what I needed to write at the time. And I think Bigger in Texas was an idea that I held on to, or that held on to me for long enough for me to teach myself screenwriting. I didn't lose interest before I got to the end, or maybe I did, but I pushed through. It was something I felt like I could sink my teeth into. And I thought it was like a little different. So I was like, okay, maybe this is worth it. I'm not writing just to write. I'm writing to this particular story. And maybe I do have something to say or something to reveal or something to teach people. My second script, I think I knew it would never get made. I knew that I didn't have a manager. I didn't know many people in Hollywood, but I knew that my experience working on Capitol Hill and like government adjacent stuff was different. And if somebody was making a TV show that was set in Congress, that was making a TV show that was set in DC, they would want somebody who they knew that world. And so I wrote specifically as many like insidery locations as I could in a creative way to show them that I knew that world and I could like be playful in that world. So that was definitely like a calling card of like, here are things I love and things I know in case this is useful to you, with no real anticipation of it getting made. And it was Much Ado, which I've loved for decades, and really enjoyed the experience of adapting it and figuring out what worked for a script and what didn't. So that taught me something too. Divorce Ranch was originated with a story in my family that I had learned for a long time. My great aunt got divorced in Nevada in the middle of last century. And then I just went down a rabbit hole of like really loving this space that you haven't seen on TV or in movies a ton. There's a little bit in the movie The Women, which I believe is 1942. Where there's no men in the cast, and then they end up at a divorce ranch at the end. There's a movie, Desert Hearts, from the 80s. It's kind of a coming out story that takes place at a divorce ranch. Both are wonderful, but there's just not been a ton in what I thought was like a very interesting location. So that always felt like a TV show. I'm starting to have forgotten the question. What is successful?
Yeah.
And then, and I don't know where my like teen time travel buddy comedy is going, but I think it shows a different side of some of the stuff that I think about that isn't always so serious and social commentary related. They've all been useful. I think Bigger in Texas has gotten the most acclaim, but each one has been of interest to some person that I've met with. They've all been requested before to kind of see what other stuff I write, and they've all taught me something. So yeah, I don't consider any of them a failure or a waste of time. But I mean, financially, they have not been successful.
Well,
like truly, I have not sold anything.
That's the part, though.
Just for your readers or your listeners to know,
But I mean, that selling something being the baseline I've done so much damage to myself in the past being like, I didn't sell this thing if it's a failure. And I've fought against it for a long time to make the baseline, did I teach myself something here? Did this further me in a way? And it's not easy. It's not easy to get there.
But like the baseline for my next work in progress was like, I don't want to write anything I can't sell. You know, like there are a couple, you know, situations I'm coming across where they don't want to get too political or, you know, they don't want to be controversial. I don't want another calling card script. Like I want something that could be made. It may not be made, but I want to at least like write towards something filmable in the general and in today's climate specifically. So that's, you know, a different calculation than I've been making before, but it's different now. Like I have a manager, he's been magnificent. I have this contest win and final draft supporting me, which has been wonderful. So the opportunities are different.
But also, yeah, I mean, getting stuff made is...
I want to get made. Yeah.
That's the point.
Everything's a step in the right direction. Yeah. It's the ability to share with other people. Like I get a lot out of just telling people about some of these scripts. Like the same way, tying it back to recommending books. Like if I get to tell people about my aunt's story and about divorce ranches in Reno in 1934, and they're like, I've never heard of that. Like, that's a success. They may never read my pilot. Like, that's fine. But now they know about something they didn't know about before that I find really interesting, and maybe they find really interesting. So it's still scratching the same itch, even though, you know, it's not a outward measurement of success.
Right. Well, I appreciate you stopping by a ton. This has been awesome.
Yeah.
So much cool
stuff. It was great to talk to you.
I had a lot of fun. Where can people find you online? Or do you you don't even have to send them anywhere if you don't want to?
I don't want to be found. I mean, no, my website is laurakroeger.us, LAURAKROEGER. My contact info is there. I am, if you find me on social media, it's probably not something I check a lot these days.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
I kind of don't even know how to sum up the conversation that I had with Laura that you just listened to, because it's one of my favorites. It was so much fun. She had so much awesome stuff to say, and I really do think there's so much insight in there for people who are starting out writing film and TV, and she just says so much stuff. It's not prescriptive, obviously. Everything is different for every single person. You know, what she did might not be the thing that's going to help you, but it's just so interesting to hear what people are doing and what they've gone through and the dedication that they've had to their craft and to the art. And I really love a thing she said about joy. You know, that really stuck out to me, and I have it clipped because I think it's just an amazing thing to keep in mind, you know, rejecting cynicism and embracing joy. Thank you so much to Laura. Thank you to her manager, Max Gonzalez, for helping make this happen. It's a great conversation. I'm glad that we had it. Thank you to you for listening. Again, go to austinrwilson.com to check out my work, or now go to patreon.com/Ledger Podcast if you're looking to help support the show. I really appreciate every second that you listen to of this show. It means a lot to me. And I have another one coming up very soon. You're going to want to keep your eyes open for it. See you then.